This is Laura Mayer with her History 330 final assignment presentation on how to study history. I will be telling you what the tools of historian are and how to utilize them. So first up is the types and diversity of sources. Primary sources, these are going to be a big one for historians with their research and how they're going to interpret events and topics. So these are going to be documents, diaries, journals, letters, photos, anything from the period or the time of which the event that you're studying. So things that happened at the same time that your event was going on, or at least within a few years. So secondary sources, these are going to be scholarly journals, monographs, book reviews, even films, etc. These are all going to be from expert scholars with actual credentials that you can look up and you can find and you can verify. So when starting to research a topic, research an event, what are you going to start with? Start with a historian, first and foremost. Once you've gathered a few sources within the history field by a historian, from there you're going to branch out to closer related fields to the event and topic you're studying, and looking at sources from other scholars. And it's also important to mention that when you're first coming or starting to study an event or topic, find a historiography of the event or topic. That'll give you a good background into sort of the idea and the interpretations that have already been said, and it'll give you an idea of the history of the event and topic. Diversity of perspective. Everyone and all historians are going to have a different perspective. Perspective is going to be influenced and affected by family, religion, ethnicity, nationality, things that happen in your life particular to you. You're going to be hard-pressed to find somebody with the exact same perspective as you do. So it's important to keep this in mind when researching and studying history, understanding that there are different perspectives out there, and even bringing them into your research to give a wider analysis, understanding, interpretation of history. So historians from different countries are going to have different perspectives. Like for example, if you're studying World War II, an American historian is going to have probably a different view than a Japanese historian, just based on culture, how the war affected their own country, their own people. So it's important to keep that in mind when studying history. So bias and perspective, they are pretty much the same thing. So it's just important to make sure that you don't let your bias completely take over your researching and how you think about a topic, and that you are still allowing yourself to branch out and look at other perspectives than your own. So this is a big one to keep in mind when you are writing anything as a historian. First of all, your bias. Try to keep it out of your writing, because it can affect the credibility or reliability of your source. you might not be able to completely eradicate it from your writing, and it might still creep in, but it's important to at least understand your own bias, where you're coming from, and why you think this way. And that'll at least help. It'll give you an awareness, and so you'll be able to pick it out in your writing, but also making sure that you give a little disclaimer as to, this is my perspective, this is my bias, it's in here, this is what it is. And that'll go a long way to giving a little bit more of credibility. So reliability, what is it? It's going to be basically kind of how truthful is the source? Is it verifiable? Can you find other sources that say the same things? Is there a lot of more imaginative and guesswork in there? So if it isn't verifiable, don't use it because you don't know how much of it is the truth and actual historical fact. Credibility. As you're reading through the source, you're going to want to watch out for how much the reader or how much the author lets their bias creep in, and if they acknowledge their bias or not. If they don't, that might be a little flag, or just something to watch out for. But then also you're going to want to make sure that the author has expertise in the area, that they know what they're talking about. And you want to make sure that in the source that they bring in a variety of different perspectives and give different sides to the story, rather than just looking at it from one perspective, from the viewpoint of like a particular single bias. So interpretation is how, through the studying and researching of primary sources, historians have deducted or deduced how an event happened, what happened during, and the effects of the event. The interpretation of event and kind of an understanding of what actually happened. This is constantly being revised as more historians enter into this field, each with their own perspective and lens to look through. Now I'm going to explain lenses in the next slide, but it's just kind of a way through which you analyze history and events. So the interpretation of an event can change quite a bit through the years, because you're probably going to have revelation of new sources, the creation and the advantage of new technology, and the added diversification of perspectives from historians. So with all of these things, they're going to provide more opportunities and different ways to look at and analyze an event. That's going to provide a larger understanding and maybe even a more truthful interpretation, understanding of an event and how it happened. So each historian is going to have their own interpretation based on their own perspective and the lenses of which they look through. And so it's important that you look at a wide variety of historians' interpretations to understand and kind of get the big picture of an event. Of history. Like I said in the previous slide, that these lenses are what you are going to analyze history with, what you're going to look through almost. If you're using like a glass, like if you have glasses, you can use that as an analogy because you can have different colored lenses and that'll dictate how you see the world. So it's going to be like the angle you're coming at a topic or event from and the ideas that you address when researching a topic. You could have more than one lens when you're studying a topic. It's probably better if you have more than one, so you get a wider understanding of the topic. And so examples of these lenses are going to be intellectual history, like social history, social history, political history, and cultural history. These are all lenses that you can use when looking at an event. For example, if you're studying a particular time period or an event through a cultural lens, you're going to be analyzing the event and the culture within that time period or within that event, and we're looking at the values and the traditions of the people and the culture of that society, and you're going to be looking at maybe how it shifted, how it changed, or even how it influenced the event or time period or whatever you're studying. Of history. Fields of history are going to be the overarching topics or subject matter that a historian can focus on and become an expert in. Fields like military history, women's history, environmental history, science of the arts, etc. So most historians look at these fields through lenses unique to them, lenses that they are able to utilize to be able to analyze events. So, for example, if you take women's history, either a particular topic or a period of time, and you look at that through a gendered lens, you're going to be able to distinguish and understand how the idea of gender roles, kind of what they were, how they influenced, how they sat in society, and with also the idea of masculine and feminine, how they were defined, how they might have changed or even influenced the topic or time period that you're looking at. And like with military history, if you look at it through a political lens, understand how politics might have either influenced the event or topic and how it fit in, or how your topic or event influenced in turn and changed politics and how they work together. So you can use pretty much any lens with any type of field of history. There's really no limit or anything stopping you from using all these different modes of analysis or lenses of analysis to research and study your event through. Causation. So within causation, we have two types, necessary and sufficient. Necessary causation is going to be the origin event from which the topic or event being studied stems from. It is necessary that this event happened because it started these sequences, the chain of events that led up to the main topic. Though it is not imperative that the origin event happen directly before the main event in terms of chronology. There can be years, decades, even a few hundred years before the origin of the main topic, which can it can pose a bit of a problem to historians when they're researching and trying to determine this necessary cause, because they really have a lot of things, a lot of events that they have to go through and analyze to determine the necessary causation, the origin event. Not to mention that historians, through their interpretations, they are going to have different ideas of the origin event that led up to the main topic. So there can be, it's not always a unanimous, I guess, vote or a unanimous idea as to what the necessary cause of a particular event is. So sufficient cause, these are going to be these supplemental things or events that happen that spurred on the event being researched. They may have shaped how the event happened and how it began, providing these smaller, more minute details as to why the event happened the way it did. These sufficient causes are able to provide background into the event and help determine why it is so important based on the events leading up to the so-called main event. So yeah, these are going to be the smaller things that influenced how the main event happened the way it did. And normally you're going to have quite a few sufficient causes. It's not going to be just one or two like the necessary causation, but you're going to have many sufficient causes. So, hypotheses and theses. So the hypothesis is going to be the preliminary question that you ask to give an idea of where to start researching. This is going to be sort of ground zero, a general idea of a question that you have after your very, very preliminary research. That's going to give you kind of a foothold to base the rest of your research off of. And your thesis, this is going to be the finished product, so to speak, your more refined hypothesis after you've done the research and understand the topic more thoroughly. Your thesis is going to be what you think or what you've proven or what you thought you've proven through your research and with your interpretation. And this is the claim that historians try to prove through their work, as I said. So this kind of like the difference between research question and the argument almost. So you start with a broad sense of a topic, and as you research it further, it slowly becomes more refined until at the end you come up with your thesis, which you then try to prove with the research and the argument you made from the research and your own interpretation. Argumentative writing. Narrative writing is like that of a story. It presents facts and historical truth through narration, or even a collection of stories or narrations that illustrate the reality of your event and its impact. Argumentative writing tries to prove a point, a thesis. Argumentative writing may be a bit more focused on the point that it is trying to prove and drawing in historical fact to strengthen and support their interpretation of an event. Now, both types can and should be telling a story, weaving a compelling tale that both invokes and tells the reader why it is important to know and understand the impact that the event had while basing it off of complete historical fact and limited guesswork and even interpretation if you cannot completely back it up with your primary sources. So it's important to realize that as a historian and as you're writing, that your audience is not going to be only those who have studied history. It's going to be all kinds of people. So it's important to make your writing palatable to even, I guess, what you could call the lay people, those who don't know much about history. And so that means writing it, like I said, in a story way with in a compelling way that makes it easy to understand and gets the reader involved, while also sticking to the facts with very little, if none at all, more imaginative guesswork. And annotated bibliography. So what to cite? You're going to want to cite summaries, quotes, paraphrases, anything taken from somebody else, either by written or spoken word. These are things that you are 110% going to cite. You must cite them, because if you don't, it is considered plagiarizing, and you're going to lose your credibility if you do not cite. Footnotes, though, those are going to be a little bit more, I guess, inclusive. Those are going to be things, footnotes you can use to define terms, to give further readings, suggest further readings for anyone who wants to get to know or learn about a particular idea or topic that you brought up in your writing. It's also a way to give credit or let the reader know that you might have been influenced by a particular source that you weren't able to bring into your research, but that led you to think of a topic or something in a particular way, something that influenced you. So footnotes have a little bit more wiggle room, and that's where you can put a lot of added information. So the annotated bibliography, what is it? How do you do it? So it's going to be a short summary of what the author is trying to convey, what it's about, and why it's important to your researching process. It's supposed to be a tool for the researcher to allow them to find a source more easily when they're going back through and trying to either, organize or even find a source that they used before much more easily than looking at all the different citations and maybe not remembering what exactly they entailed. So give credit to everything. Like I said, make sure you cite. And if you're not sure, you can cite something, throw it in a footnote if it's not, citation worthy. The bibliography slide. So the entirety of the information that I have used on these slides were taken from my notes that I wrote down from Professor G. Murray Stevens' class during our History 330 lecture, Historical Thinking, in the fall semester of 2018 from August to November in Tempe, Arizona. And in the slide of my narrative and argumentative writing, I used Robert Williams' The Historian's Toolbox textbook or book to help give me a further understanding as to the differences and what each of them were. So thank you for sticking through my entire presentation. Hope you enjoyed it.